This is a question we hear surprisingly often. If my house is going to be subject to inheritance tax anyway, should I just give it to the kids now and get it out of my estate? On the surface, it sounds logical. Property values are high, inheritance tax is 40%, and for many people, the family home is the single largest asset they own. So it feels sensible to ask whether giving it away early might solve the problem. But giving your house to your children is one of the most misunderstood and in many cases poorly executed estate planning strategies. Done badly, it can create tax problems, legal issues, family disputes, and in some cases leave you in a far worse position than if you'd done nothing at all. In this video, we want to walk you through the main pitfalls of giving your house away, explain when it does and doesn't work for inheritance tax planning, and help you understand the loss of control and other risks that are often overlooked. But before we get into it, if you have the benefit of working with Astute and this video raises any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with your usual financial planner. If you're new to Astute, we've left a link in the description box below to guide you to the right place to get in touch. Let's start with the biggest misconception, which is the idea that simply transferring ownership of your home removes it from your estate for inheritance tax. If you give your house to your children but continue to live in it rent-free, this is classed as a gift with reservation of benefit. In plain English, this means HMRC says you've given the asset away in name only, but you're still enjoying the benefit of it. And if that's the case, the property is still fully included in your estate for inheritance tax purposes when you die. This catches a huge number of people out. They've signed the house over, they believe it's no longer theirs, but for tax purposes, the revenue looks straight through the arrangement and treats the house as if it were never given away at all. The inheritance tax bill is still there, but now the house legally belongs to the children, which can create practical problems when the estate needs to be settled. There is a workaround here, which is to pay market rent to the children once the house has been gifted. If you genuinely pay a full commercial rent, review it regularly and treat it like a real landlord-tenant relationship, the gift may no longer be classed as a gift with reservation.
But this solution introduces a whole new set of issues. First, the rent you pay becomes taxable income for your children. Second, you need sufficient income to afford that rent for the rest of your life. And third, the arrangement has to be watertight. If the rent is too low, stops being paid, or isn't properly documented, HMRC can still challenge it. So already, what sounded like a simple idea is becoming complex, expensive, and fragile. The next major pitfall is the loss of control. Once you give your house away, it's no longer yours, your children own it. That means they ultimately control what happens to it, not you. Even in the best families, circumstances change. Relationships evolve, people get divorced, run into financial trouble, or fall out. If your child gets divorced, the house could be considered as part of a divorce settlement. If they're sued, made bankrupt, or run a business that fails, the house could be a risk from creditors. If one child owns the property and dies before you, it may pass to their spouse or children, rather than back to you or to the rest of your family. And crucially, if you ever needed to move, perhaps into supported living or to be closer to family, you would need your children's agreement to sell the house. You've given up the legal right to decide. This loss of control is often underestimated because people assume my children would never do that. And most of the time that's true. But good financial planning isn't about assuming best case scenarios. Part of it is about preventing unforeseen harm coming to your financial position.
Another area that causes real problems is care fees and deliberate deprivation of assets. There's a persistent myth that giving your house away protects it from being assessed for care fees. In reality, local authorities have wide powers to look back at past transactions and decide whether an asset was given away deliberately to avoid paying for care. The key question is around intent. If, at the time you gave the house away, avoiding care costs was a motivation, the local authority can treat you as if you still own the property. That means you could be assessed as having an asset you no longer legally own, but without the ability to access its value. This is one of the worst outcomes we see. The house is in the children's name, but the parent is still treated as owning it for care fee purposes, leaving them stuck in the middle. It's also worth talking about capital gains tax, because this is another hidden cost that's often ignored. When you die owning your main residence, your beneficiaries usually inherit it at its market value at the date of death, with no capital gains tax paid up to that point. But if you give the house away during your lifetime, that uplift is lost. If your children later sell the property, any increase in value from the date of the gift to the date of sale could be subject to capital gains tax. So even if inheritance tax is reduced or avoided, another tax can quietly replace it.
Now, with all of that said, are there situations where gifting a property can form part of effective inheritance tax planning? Yes, but they are much narrower than people are often led to believe. It generally only works cleanly where the property is genuinely surplus to requirements. For example, if someone owns more than one property or is downsizing and does not need the capital or the use of the gifted asset, a gift can be structured properly and allowed to fall outside the estate over time. Sometimes a better way to make this gift is to raise a debt against the property, such as by way of equity release, and give the cash away instead. This is effective for inheritance tax planning and allows you to retain control of your home, but the trade-off is the cost of servicing the debt. Even then, it needs to be considered alongside cash flow planning, future care needs, family circumstances, and the rest of the estate. It's rarely something that should be done in isolation.
There's another important point that often gets missed, and that's how a successful transfer of your home is actually treated for inheritance tax purposes. If the gift is structured properly and the property can be considered as genuinely having left your estate, it doesn't disappear from the tax calculation overnight. Instead, this gift remains relevant for inheritance tax for 7 years from the date it is made. If you survive those 7 years, the value of the gift falls outside your estate for inheritance tax purposes. But if you don't, some or all of the value of that property is brought back into the calculation. This is where things can become particularly uncomfortable for families. If something were to happen to you within that 7-year window, the tax position depends on the size of the gift and how it interacts with your available allowances. But crucially, any inheritance tax that is due on that gift does not fall on your estate. It falls on the recipient of the gift. And when the gift is a property, that can create a real problem.
The tax bill is still due within 6 months of death, but the asset that triggered the charge isn't cash, it's a house. Unless your children have sufficient spare capital elsewhere, they may be forced to borrow or even sell the property simply to pay the tax bill. That's rarely what anyone had in mind when the gift was made. So even in a scenario where the transfer works exactly as intended from an inheritance tax planning perspective, there's still a period of risk where the planning is incomplete and where the financial consequences land with the next generation rather than being neatly dealt with through the estate. More often, what we find is that people are trying to solve an inheritance tax problem in the wrong order. They start with the house because it feels big and immovable, rather than stepping back and looking at the whole picture. There are often other planning tools that preserve control, flexibility, and security while still addressing the tax issue.
So if you're asking yourself whether you should give your house away to your children, the honest answer is this. It's rarely the straightforward solution it's made out to be, and in many cases it creates more problems than it solves. Good estate planning isn't about rushing to remove assets from your estate. It's about balancing tax efficiency with control, security, and peace of mind for you and for your family. If you found this helpful, or you're thinking about your own estate planning and want to understand your options properly, take a look at our other videos on inheritance tax and legacy planning, or get in touch to have a structured conversation about what makes sense for you. See you next time.